I'm Sarah Coates. Thanks for joining me. We begin with growing tensions between Iran and the United States, and US President Donald Trump is rejecting a New York Times report which says he's considering sending 120,000 troops to the Middle East as the US mounts pressure on the Islamic Republic. An aircraft carrier and bomber planes have already been sent to the region, but Trump says the report suggesting American soldiers will be dispatched is untrue.
I think it's fake news, okay? Now, would I do that? Absolutely. But we have not planned for that. Hopefully, we're not going to have to plan for that. And if we did that, we'd send a hell of a lot more troops than that. But I think it's just, where was that story? In the New York Times? Well, the New York Times is fake news.
Meanwhile, Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has come out to say there will be no war with the United States, despite these mounting tensions between the two arch-enemies over Iranian nuclear capabilities and its missile program. Khamenei also saying in an address broadcast on state television that Iran will not negotiate with the United States on a nuclear deal. Now, all of this 2 days after the sabotage of 4 oil vessels, including 2 Saudi tankers off the coast of the UAE. According to an anonymous official, American military investigators believe Iran was responsible, and the 5 to 10 foot holes in the tankers were caused by explosive charges. Iran's foreign minister telling Iranian state TV in India after a bilateral meeting with his Indian counterpart that Iran had anticipated sabotage in the region by hardliners in the US administration and others to escalate tension.
We discussed regional matters. We also talked about the policies that hardliners in the US administration, as well as in the region, are attempting to impose. We raised concerns over the suspicious activities and sabotage that are happening in our region. We had formally anticipated that they would carry out these sorts of activities to escalate tension.
Saudi Arabia has halted pumping oil on its major east-west pipeline after a drone attack onto Aramco oil installations claimed by Iranian-aligned Houthi rebels. Saudi's energy minister Khaled al-Faleh says while the line, which is able to pump 5 million barrels of crude per day, has temporarily shut down for its condition to be evaluated, oil exports have not been interrupted. He's calling the drone attack an act of terrorism. Houthi military forces claimed responsibility for a drone attack on 2 oil pumping stations in Saudi Arabia.
This one-of-a-kind attack comes as a legitimate response to the committed crimes against our dear people and our great nation, as well as the ongoing economic blockade. This is also an execution of the promises of the revolution by targeting the enemy's vital, sensitive establishments as long as the aggression does not stop.
And for more on all of this, let's now go to our senior Washington correspondent, Dan Raviv, who is standing by in DC. Dan, lovely to have you on. We've heard Trump and Khamenei both say that they don't want war. So tell me, what are the chances that all of this tension may in fact lead to that?
Let's add one more statement. The American Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, he happens to be visiting Russia. I know you're covering that as well. He said that the United States is not gearing up for war. So I would say that in general, the Trump administration is trying to turn down the heat. But the fact is, of course, that the United States had already decided to send an aircraft carrier strike force and extra bombers to the region. But specifically, the New York Times report that there's a plan in the Pentagon for 120,000 U.S. troops to be sent to be close to Iran. President Trump says that's fake news. He is denying the report, Sarah.
And Dan, tell us, we know that the US National Security Advisor, John Bolton, he's very hawkish. Tell me, does this approach affect Trump's direction when it comes to Iran when he has Pompeo on the side?
Well, that's a great question, and we can't be absolutely certain. We know John Bolton from before he entered government service under President Trump. And as a news commentator, he was very hawkish on Iran and even suggested that America should use its military might to help overthrow the Ayatollahs in Iran. Now, we do not know whether John Bolton's been saying that to President Trump privately in the White House. It may be. Secretary Pompeo, he's also a hardliner on Iran and a lot of other subjects on earth, but it's all up to President Trump, and what appeals to him is the right approach. Don't forget, Mr. Trump has suggested to the Iranian leaders they should pick up the phone and call him. He wants to negotiate a firmer, tougher Iran nuclear deal. So he says, Sarah.
And let's go back now to Russia. Pompeo says he urged Russia to show that election interference is a thing of the past, and both administrations wanted it to be the end of Russian meddling. So do you believe this will be the end?
It's kind of interesting. In today's meeting in Sochi, Russia, Pompeo and his Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov, both made it clear that relations have been bad between the U.S. and Russia. Both said they want the relations to improve, but absolutely in public, the American Pompeo said that if Russia interferes in the 2020 election next year here in the U.S., that would be very bad for relations. So Pompeo was warning the Russians not to do it. Of course, Russia denies ever having meddled in U.S. affairs. One other subject Pompeo brought up, he wants Russia to stop supporting Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela, the man who's labeled by the U.S. as a dictator, but clearly Russia is on Maduro's side, Sarah.
Okay, Dan Raviv, always a pleasure. Thank you so much. Excitement is really building here in Tel Aviv with Eurovision Song Contest getting underway in under an hour with the first semi-final. 17 nations are competing with 10 of the best, then advancing through to the grand final. Last year alone, more than 189 million viewers tuned in to watch the contest. And our correspondent Emily Francis is there standing by. Emily, so many people from around the world have come right here to Tel Aviv for Eurovision. So tell me, what is the atmosphere like where you are?
Hello, Sarah. Well, it's funny. You kind of lose a sense of the fact that like hundreds of millions of people are going to watch it, because here the vibe is chill. We're in the press area. They're playing music all around. Everybody's just hanging out. It's almost like, you know, we're separated from where the action is, but clearly the action is going to be getting underway literally within the hour. People very excited as 17 of the contestants are going to be competing in the semifinal, in which 10 will continue on to the final on Saturday. And amongst some of the performers people have been talking about thus far, from looking at rehearsals, who are going to be taking the stage tonight, is Australia, Cyprus, Poland, even Iceland, creating a lot of buzz as well. So they will be taking the stage. And the interesting thing is, for those of us, you know, especially in the States that aren't familiar with Eurovision, at least I wasn't prior to moving here, the voting is such that the juries from the participating countries have already voted based on the second dress rehearsal yesterday. So that's already been decided. And then tonight with the broadcast is when all the fans will vote, and then they would announce the winner as to who is going to continue on. And then the same thing will happen during the next round of semis on Thursday. But back to tonight, very exciting. Netta Barzilai, last year's winner, is going to be taken to the stage tonight, as well as Donna International, who won back in 1998. And Israeli hopeful Kobi Marimi, lucky for him and for all of us in Israel, he gets an automatic entrance into the final. So he will not be taking part in the semifinals at all.
Okay, and Emily...
Anyway, we're having fun. Good. Australia, thought of you.
Good to hear. Well, Emily, tell us, a lot of events planned for tonight, of course, over the next few days. How many people have come here to celebrate?
Well, they're saying the projections are about 10,000 people. The question is, are all 10,000 here? But it's seemingly just you. I know you live locally around Tel Aviv. I think most of the people here are taking part in, you know, drinking up everything that Tel Aviv has to offer. And then, of course, there are those that have tickets to see the
Certainly.
show. And also within Israel, I met a very nice family that came in from the south after going through, obviously, very rough few weeks with all the flaring up of missiles.
Yes.
But they've come here and they're very excited to be here as well.
Okay, well, we'll come back to you a little later on. Emily Francis, thank you so much. We're going out for a short break. Plenty more when we come back. Stay with us.
I'm Michelle McCory on I-24 News. Join me on Clear Cut, where we cut to the chase with a straightforward yet insightful breakdown of the world's top political and economic stories.
Weeknights beginning at 7 p.m. Eastern, only on I-24 News.
Whether you're just getting out of bed or starting your day, or you're already hard at work, we cut through the clutter to give you the right dose. Breaking news and top headlines from Israel, the Middle East, and around the world. Politics, pop culture, sports, and music. We track the big stories from the heart of the Middle East. Brace yourself for your daily dose of news.
IT Center is an IT software and consulting company that develops and supplies communication and security solutions for the service provider industry. Voices is our unified communications collection of products with a groundbreaking hybrid architecture that grants flexibility and virtually unlimited control. From standard maintenance and support to specialized consulting, our offer can be customized to serve any size of organization. Working with us brings efficiency to all your communications. Every day, everywhere, everything connected.
Go beyond the headlines every day on I-24 News. Host Ami Kaufman talks to the news makers and pundits to bring you the story behind the headlines.
Watch The Spin Room, Mondays and Thursdays, 4:05 p.m. Eastern, only on I-24 News.
Welcome back. There's renewed tension between Israel and Poland after Poland's foreign ministry cancelled a planned visit to Warsaw by Israeli officials. Poland releasing a statement saying Poland decided to cancel the visit of Israeli officials after the Israeli side made last-minute changes in the composition of the delegation, suggesting that the talks would primarily focus on the issues related to property restitution, adding Israelis will not be prevented from coming to Poland and talking about the issue, but with regards to their desire to talk about restitution, our position is that Germans are responsible for crimes against Jews committed in Polish territory during the Holocaust. This after thousands took to the streets in Warsaw over the weekend after the United States passed a law on the restitution of property from the Holocaust, with Poles slamming the US for messing with its internal affairs. And for more, I'm joined here in the studio by Nahiel Dyson, who's the CEO of the World Jewish Restitution Organisation. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. Firstly, what can you tell us about the US law on the restitution of Jewish property seized during and after the Holocaust?
The new law that was adopted about a year ago and was signed by President Trump is called the JUST Act, is actually a law that is not saying anything about actual action, but only reporting on the actions towards implementing a new law on restitution. All actions regarding restitution of all countries, not only Poland.
Okay, and Nahiel, tell me, what sort of process do people have to go through to get their possessions back?
There are places that countries that had in place a law. So the process was according to the law. People could apply. They had some time, a few years that could apply, and then receive their property back. In Poland is one of the only country in the European Union that did not have a law in place that can let people really apply for their properties. So what's happening is if they say if you want to, you go to the just to court. But you know that to go to court when the people were so many people, 3 million Jews in Poland died in the Holocaust. If you have to then bring some certificate like a death certificate. It's very problematic to bring that.
And tell me, let's talk about the rest of Europe. How have countries, let's say, in the East and the West dealt with restitution?
So we work, WGRO works in a few countries, many countries around, mainly Eastern Europe now. In Romania, there was a process of restitution. A lot of properties were given back according to that process. Also in Serbia, we had just now, a year or 2 years ago, there was a new law that had some process, some way that they're acting or doing something regarding restitution. What's happening now that in Poland, this is a country that is not doing that and not following actually the declaration, the Terezin Declaration that was signed in 2009, where 47 countries signed and declared that they will do what's needed for the restitution process.
And Naliel, tell me, can we expect further fallout between Israel and Poland in the wake of this, with this visit cancelled?
We see it as an episode. I don't think this will stop the whole negotiation. We are sure that the Polish government will get the act together maybe a little bit after the elections, because now they have elections, and we hope for the best. We hope the process will go on also in Poland.
Okay, Naliel Dyson, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Now to the rise of anti-Semitism around the world, and Germany has just published data showing that there was a rise of nearly 20% of anti-Semitic incidents last year, with close to all of those incidents carried out by right-wing extremists, a jump of nearly 20% on the previous year. Germany's Interior Minister listing just over 7,700 incidents in xenophobic in 2018, compared to nearly 1,800 the year before. And for more, let's now go to our I-24 News Europe correspondent, Polina Garayev, who is standing by. Polina, thank you so much. We're seeing this worrying report coming out of Germany. Tell me, why is it that we're seeing this huge spike now in anti-Semitism?
Well, of course, anti-Semitism is a problem that did not disappear in recent years. Anti-Semitism has been present in all over Europe, and specifically in Germany. But before we talk about Germany, I just want to refer to our guests here. I have with me the chief rabbi of Poland, and I heard in the studio you're talking before about the recent tension between Israel and Poland, the controversy regarding the restitution of Jewish property. I think it would be interesting to hear from the rabbi here, who has personal ties to the government. How should we in Israel, in other countries, view this recent development?
Okay, what is important to realize is that we need to have, as best as we can, diplomacy. That is, to speak the two sides together, explain what is upsetting us, what is sensitive, but also to listen to the other side, what is upsetting them. And also what happens often is that we hear the bad things, and there are bad things that happen, and we must criticize them. But we often don't hear the good things. The way that President Duda criticized twice in the last month and a half anti-Semitism. That goes unheard.
So we talked before about the connection that this recent development might have to the European election in a bit over 10 days. Is this really the reason? Is this internal politics, or is it motivated by anti-Semitism?
I don't remember who said this, but somebody said a long time ago, all politics are domestic politics. It's absolutely what people are saying. It does have to do with the elections, that this ruling party has succeeded in that the anti-Semites have not formed their own political party, as they have in several other European countries. But the price for that is a reluctancy to condemn an actual act of anti-Semitism. And this, we need to work with the Polish government to explain to them that this is unacceptable to the Israeli government. It's unacceptable to the Jewish people. If you want to be in a dialogue, in a relationship with us, we need to hear you speak out against anti-Semitism, just as we also need to speak out against anti-Polish sentiments.
So do you believe that the situation will improve after the European election? We see tones will perhaps become softer?
It depends how good we do our job. If we do diplomacy well, if we engage, if we explain to them what is wrong, what is hurtful, and what is right, what we need, what we want to hear, if we're able to engage, then it will absolutely has a big chance of getting better.
So you're hopeful?
I'm always hopeful. If I wasn't hopeful, I wouldn't be working in Poland.
Thank you very much for joining us, so spontaneously, I must add. This is some shred of optimism coming from the conference of European rabbis here in Antwerp. We spoke, of course, about rising anti-Semitism, but as was stressed earlier today, it's important to stress not only about the threat, the problems that Jewish life in Europe faces, and you mentioned reports of rising anti-Semitism in Germany. They're, of course, coupled with reports of rising anti-Semitism in France, in UK, even in the United States. But there's also a lot of progress being made, especially also in the communication between Jewish communities and their local governments.
OK, Polina Garayev, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Now, with the situation in the Gaza Strip occasionally exploding into full-on conflict, there's been a staggering rise in post-trauma among Israelis. Natal, the Israeli Trauma and Resiliency Centre, reporting a 40% jump in calls over the past year to its helpline from Israelis living in the country's south. So how does a whole generation cope growing up under fire? Jonathan Serrero brings this report.
One day the situation is extremely difficult. The next, it's quiet. Then in 3 weeks, it's difficult again. It's a new generation growing up in Israel that was born into this situation.
First, the rockets rain down, then it's time to pick up the pieces. For the hundreds of thousands of Israelis for whom these escalations are routine, that damage is not just physical, it's also mental.
If anyone thinks once the fighting is over, everything's quiet, exactly the opposite is true. The next day, people are only just beginning with their own personal wars.
Orly Gal is the director of Natal, the Israeli Trauma and Resiliency Centre. The charity operates a helpline and welfare services to help Israelis suffering from post-trauma from life under Hamas rockets.
People who have post-trauma, it's an invisible injury. Our job is to shed light on it, to expose it, so people can go back to living.
There's still a sense that my place isn't safe. There's still an experience that my house is not safe, that a rocket could fall at any moment, that there could be a rocket siren at any moment.
Natal says a shocking 72% of children in Israel's south suffer the symptoms of post-trauma, as well as 33% of adults. Over the weekend of the 4th and 5th of May, Hamas and Islamic Jihad rained 690 rockets on Israel, sending Israelis as far as Beersheba and Rehovot into bomb shelters and killing 4 Israeli civilians. 1,000 Israelis contacted Natal's free helpline during the 2-day bombardment, and 1,000 since.
Often a case can start with a parent scared for their small children, but we can hear in their voices that they're also scared for themselves. And when we ask them, how are you? How do you feel? We immediately understand that they need help as well.
This resident of Nativ HaAsara on the Gaza border says what's more exhausting than waking up at night from rocket sirens is the uncertainty about how long this war of attrition will last.
The greater the expectations and nothing happens, the more profound the disappointment. Think, there's a growing effect of disappointment upon disappointment. It becomes a huge pit of disappointments, and then comes the despair.
Now, as we've been reporting, the Eurovision semi-finals kick off tonight in Tel Aviv, with a second semi-final round on Thursday and the grand final happening on Saturday. But there are question marks on whether Madonna will perform at the grand final, with Eurovision organisers saying that a contract has yet to be signed.
The fans are ready. The stage is set, and there's only one question that remains. Will Madonna be there to excite the massive crowds with a performance at Eurovision's grand finale? The first semi-final of the 2019 Eurovision Song Contest kicks off tonight in Tel Aviv. Contestants from 41 countries are competing to win the Grand Songfest. At a press conference on Monday, the contest organizers said that they were still waiting to hear whether Madonna will take the stage at the Eurovision final.
The EBU or Cannes has never confirmed Madonna as an act for Eurovision Song Contest for the simple reason that we do not have a signed contract with her team. And if we do not have a signed contract, she cannot perform on that stage.
There are only a few days left, but the organizers claim that negotiations are still underway.
I would love to see Madonna, so hopefully she will sign a contract and be able to perform, fingers crossed.
With the $1.3 million promised to Madonna for her Israel Eurovision performance, will fans dare to dream that they'll be able to catch the pop icon's 15-minute appearance, or will their greatest expectations come crumbling down? Diana Skaya, I-24 News.
And that is all we have time for this edition of I-24 News. I'm Sarah Coates. Thanks for watching.